We are the daughters and sons of the divine. We're all kings and queens. We're all royalty, and royalty means that we have intrinsic value, that to be a unique self is to be a unique expression of the field of value, and we're in devotion to each other's uniqueness. I'm at the Maple Monastery, hence my background is different this week. And the Maple Monastery is a very beautiful Zen monastery in Vermont. And the head of the monastery, Soryu, and I have become very good friends. Myself and Soryu and Zach, we've all become, dear friends. And it's an unusual moment because it's very rare that teachers become friends in a kind of real and deep and profound way. So Soryu and I have kind of found a very, really beautiful place. And so he invited me to come give a Dharma talk to his community, which was audacious of him because much of what I say resonates with his teaching and much actually challenges, right, his teaching, which is a very beautiful teaching rooted in classical Zen. And so it was a very, very, deep and beautiful meeting. And there wasn't time to get from the monastery, where we just ended the talk just a few minutes ago, to One Mountain. I'd have to drive an hour. So this is where I am. And it's just, a beautiful place to be. So I'm just kind of sharing that moment and also explaining, like Terry Nelson always tells me, explain why your background is different. So that's why my background is different. So that's one. Two, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. This is our home, and to be with you and to be with our community and to be with the band of outrageous lovers in this time of meta-crisis, of poised between utopia and dystopia. And a lot of the questions that Soryu asked me were about what they could learn from our community, what they could learn from the Dharma, what they could learn from what we call a story of value, what they could learn from how to engage in full joy, even in the midst of a meta crisis. And so it was just a fantastic conversation. Now at 2:00, it's now 1:13 in Eastern time. So at 2:00, we're also starting another conversation, which we're starting a kind of maybe a year of conversations. They're going to happen the first Sunday of every month. And these were set up by our dear Dharma sister, Claire Molinaire, and Andrew Sweeney. And Andrew is the head of something called Parallax, which is a kind of community of inquiry in Europe. And they've also been, in their way, kind of tracking the work we've been doing here. And we're engaging them in the next year, a once-a-month deep dive dialogue. Andrew and I have done a couple of dialogues, and Andrew's been very, very generous and said that his worldview got opened and beautifully engaged and transformed, which was beautiful and generous of him. And so I look forward to those dialogues. And so we're going to end exactly at 2:00, and anyone who'd like to can join us in the dialogue. But this is home, right? This is home. This is my home, and this is for many of us home. And it's just beyond delightful to be together. So I want to just share where we are. Okay, we ready, everybody? Right after that beautiful opening by Krista, where we went into the space of the inside, and then the beautiful recapitulation was really stunning by Christina Amelon. And maybe one more kind of housekeeping note, which is the internet here. And if I can just make fun of Shahat said in our pre-meeting, she said, whenever you go to a monastery, they always tell you the internet's fine, and it never is. Yeah, so do we get to feel each other? Like, welcome. Let's welcome each other. Can we just say welcome in the chat box to each other? Like, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm doing welcome in the chat box. Welcome. Madly, madly, madly delighted to be here. Welcome. Like, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay. So where are we? We are in our second week of a new set of conversations, which are critical conversations around the next dimension we need to engage, a new story of value. And we understand that the new story of value is the most effective and important response to the meta crisis. In other words, what we're understanding is that this moment of meta crisis, this moment of being poised between utopia and dystopia. And for anyone who's new, we take the meta crisis very, very real. We take it, we understand it to be a real experience, meaning we're actually tracking very closely for the last 10 years the structures of reality, right? The global structures. And we've identified, together with colleagues around the world, about 10 major areas where the system is very likely to break down. I've been talking about this for about a decade, and people laughed for most of the decade, saying that's just ridiculous, not possible, that's alarmist. It's actually not alarmist. It's actually a very clear reading of the structure of reality. And what our premise is here in One Mountain, Many Paths is that to respond to this breakdown, right, to respond to this existential risk to our very existence, to respond to the potential of catastrophic risk, we have to identify its root cause. In other words, underneath even its generator functions, there's a root cause. And what we've identified as the root cause is a global intimacy disorder. And the global intimacy disorder itself is rooted in our incapacity to articulate a shared story of value. Intimacy within a nation, if there's a shared story of value. Intimacy within a religion, a shared story of value. Intimacy within a division in a company, right? Intimacy between a group of friends in a community, a tribe. Intimacy between subatomic particles is because they share a field of value. And value here, right, means something very, very specific. Value means a shared set of desires, and those desires are for a set of values. So for example, there's a set of desires that live in subatomic particles. They have a desire to actually form larger wholes in very specific ways. In other words, there's an entire set of mathematical laws, laws of mathematics, laws of physics, which have their own values, which are at play, which allows subatomic particles to come together to form an atom. So there's a mutuality of value. Right? There's between the subatomic particles, there's a mutuality of recognition. They recognize each other, the subatomic particles. There's a mutuality of feeling. They're actually allured to each other. There's a mutuality of value. They're operating within a shared field of value of plot lines and desires that are fulfilled in accordance with a shared script. They're operating in a shared script of physics and a shared mathematical script, right? With shared interior intention of some kind. There's this desire for more life, for more complexity, for more wholeness. The universe doesn't stop at hydrogen. Oh, hydrogen, let's stop. Hydrogen, very, very beginning. Hydrogen, let's stop. No, the universe continues, right? Elements, right? Atoms, right? And become galaxies. And there's an inevitability to that because there's a certain shared field of value. And that shared field of value creates shared purpose. So what we're saying here, and go real slow with me, friends, right? Even if you've been here 50 times, 100 times, 200 times before, we have to actually literally re-access it every week. What we're saying is that actually the root cause underneath the generator functions, the public generator functions of existential risk, which are that everything's run by win-lose metrics. So it's all rivalrous conflict. So it's non-intimate. And that's the source code of the system, which then generates fragile, complicated systems because all the parts are actually at war with each other, dissociated from each other, and you get a complicated, fragile system that breaks down. So those are the generator functions. What we're saying is underneath that is an intimacy disorder. And the intimacy disorder is based on the failure to articulate a shared narrative, and a shared narrative is based on a shared story of value. Okay, now stay close. This is our intention. So our intention is in response to existential risk, which is the death of humanity, potential death of humanity, extinction, or the death of our humanity. And the response to potential catastrophic risk, what we need to do is to actually articulate a shared story of value. Why? So anyone tell me why? Tell me why. Let's see if we can get this, okay? And anyone finish this for me, because I want this just to be kind of, we can, if you're up for it, this has to become our shared language. Why? Because every challenge, who's going to write the next sentence, is a global challenge. Who's going to write with me in the chat box? Going to play? Anyone going to help me out here? Every challenge is a global challenge. That's one, global challenge. Who's got global challenge in the chat box? Anyone picking it up or waiting for somebody else to do it? Global challenge. Every challenge is a global challenge, number one. A global challenge requires, tell me the next sentence, global coordination. No global civilization here. Stay just close to me, Ben, okay? Requires global coordination. Global coordination, only global coordination can meet a global challenge, right? Pandemic, right? Financial systems breaking down. Extraction model of resources, exponential growth curves, right? Supply chains, these are all global problems. Environment is obviously a global problem. These are all global problems. So it's a global challenge, requires a global response. A global response requires what? Give me the next word. It requires global coordination. Global coordination, right, Niam? Global coordination, right? That's right. Now to get excellent, and to get to global coordination, what do we need? We need global coherence. Go step at a time. Don't jump ahead. Don't go step at a time. So try to get global coordination, you need a kind of coherence, just like you do in a family, just like you do on a team. A friend of mine just became a quarterback for a New York team. And it's now the team needs to, right, cohere. They need to create new coherence. Okay, so we need coherence. In order to create coherence, what do we need? We need resonance. We have to resonate with each other. Okay, so global coherence needs global resonance. We need to resonate with each other. In order to resonate with each other, right, to have communion with each other, to resonate with each other, so that we can generate coherence, which then generates global coordination, right? What do we need? We need intimacy. Does everyone get it? You need global intimacy. Does that get, you got that? Now, does it make sense? No, don't jump, don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. Go slow. You need global intimacy. Now to get intimacy, right? Now, we don't have intimacy, right? So we've identified the root cause. It's a global intimacy disorder. So global intimacy disorder causes rivalrous conflict based on win-lose metrics. That becomes the story. There's no intimacy. Because intimacy means shared identity. We share identity with each other. We have mutuality of recognition. We have mutuality of feeling. We feel each other. We have mutuality of value. We're in a shared field of value, which then generates mutuality of purpose. We have shared purpose. That's intimacy. To have global intimacy, what do we need? We need a shared story of value. Yes, Ernesto, exactly right. We need a shared story of value. Okay, just like in a couple, right, between subatomic particles, right, in an organization, right, in one mountain, many paths, we need a shared story of value. Okay, now it gets kind of crazy. Okay, so why don't we just need shared values? Why do we say we need a shared story of value? Everyone get the question? Why don't we need shared values? We don't need shared values. That's what's interesting. We can have lots of different values. We can have a diversity of value. We can have a diversity of values, but underneath the diversity of values, we need two things. One is that we actually are in value itself. It's not about values, it's about value. We're in a field of value where things matter. We can have diverse values. We don't have to agree on everything. We're not looking for a homogeneous imposition of one set of values. That'd be a huge mistake. But we do need, underneath the diverse instruments in the symphony, and each instrument in the symphony might play a particular set of values. Is everyone getting this? Each instrument in the symphony might play a set of values, but there has to be a shared musical score underneath. And the musical score, if you will, or a shared ground of music. And the shared ground of music, if you will, is value itself. We need to be in value itself. And value itself means, stay close, that even though there's a diversity of expression, many different religions, many different philosophical systems, which is beautiful. We love diversity because diversity itself is a value, right? But diversity is a value among values. And underneath the diverse values, there's a shared set of first principles and first values. There's a shared set of first principles and first values. Okay. A shared set of first principles and first values. And then B, but that's not enough. You also need a shared story of value. Those are two separate things. And I want to see if we can distinguish them. And that's one, is everyone catching this? This is very subtle, but it's hugely important. So one is I need a shared set of first principles and first values. So choice, that choice, there's some measure of choice in the world. That would be a first principle and first value. Okay, the goodness of Eros, right? Eros, right? That the world is moving towards deeper contact and greater holds, first principle and first value, right? Uniqueness, that a person and reality's irreducible uniqueness itself is a value. You don't want to homogenize everyone. All right, you get that? That's a third, right? Intimacy to create, right, the integrity of intimacies, right? Shared identities with mutualities of recognition, feeling, value, and purpose, right? Intimacy is a value. Does that make sense? Right, so there's a set of, right, fairness / justice is a value. There's a set of first principles and first values. That's number one. But number two, it's not enough. You can't just have first principles and first values. You actually need to be in a story of value because we all live inside of stories. Okay, and this is our topic. And this is the second week of this topic. In other words, it's not enough to have a bunch of first principles and first values. That's important, critical, not enough. It's enough that we're both in the shared, we're all of us, right? In all of our diversities, we're in the field of value. Even though we might have diverse values, we're in the field of value. That's also critical. That's number two, but it's not enough. You need a third dimension. And the third dimension is that we're in a story. And that story's got to be a story of value. Okay, now stay close. Who's with me? We got choice, Eros, uniqueness. I guess people got bored writing in the chat box and no one wrote intimacy. And what other values did we say? We also said justice and fairness. We'll kind of get them in the chat box also, justice and fairness. Okay, awesome. Okay. So, and what did we say? Let's just see if we can track this. We said we need first principles and first values. Number one, we need first principles and first values. Number two, we said we need to be in the field of value. Okay. So number one, we need first principles and first values. Number two, we need to be in the field of value. Okay. What's three? Now stay close. Let's see if we can stay close and paying attention. Stay inside. See if this is subtle. We're trying to actually be at the freaking leading edge of culture here, addressing the meta crisis. We're trying to do something unimaginably serious. We're poised between utopia and dystopia. We're completely placing our attention, placing our hearts, right, in this conversation. So what's the third thing that's missing? So we've got first principles and first values. We have a field of value. So the third piece that's missing is what Neon just wrote in the chat box. We need a story of value. Okay. And I just recapitulated that for the last 4 minutes just to kind of gather everyone. Okay. So now let's see if we can kind of stay in here. Okay. So we need a story of value. And in the chat box, let's try and follow in the chat box, just follow the thread that we're doing. Don't write randomly, just stay just in this thread so we can all focus our attention. So what does that mean? We need a story of value. That's our topic today. Okay. Okay, tender, everyone, tender and fierce. That's our topic. What does it mean that we need a new story of value? Why do we need a new story of value? What does that mean? Why do we need a story? So let me give an example. Who here has heard of Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings? Right, Tolkien, right? Tolkien, stay close. Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, okay? And the first one is, I think, The Fellowship of the Ring. And the second one is the story of the Two Towers, right? And the third is The Return of the King. Okay, now stay close. I want to get this. This is a big deal. Just yesterday, a king was coronated in Great Britain. What's the king about? And what's Tolkien about? What's the whole story of Lord of the Rings? So the key to the whole thing is, stay really close, everybody, is that the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, sitting in Oxford, actually in the same pub in Oxford in which I wrote my doctorate in Oxford, right? Tolkien is living in a world in which value is being deconstructed. Stay close. He's living in the middle of postmodernism, right? Excuse me, of existentialism, which is the precursor to postmodernism. And value is being deconstructed. And there's this sense that there are no real stories that matter because value itself doesn't matter. And Tolkien wants to speak into that cultural space. He wants to speak for the intrinsic nature of value itself. And he does it through one method, which I'm going to tell you in about a minute. But first, get the core thing of the Lord of the Rings. What's the ring? The ring. What's the ring about? Do you remember Gollum? Gollum finds the ring. It's the one ring that's left over. And he's driven mad by the ring. He murders his friend. Right? His first name was Smeagol. Right? Smeagol murders his friend in order to get the ring. And he looks at the ring and he says, precious. Remember that? Anyone remember? Precious. My precious. What does precious mean, my friends? Value. Precious means value, right, my friends? So what does the ring stand for? The ring stands for anti-value. The ring is the underminer of all value. The ring is, as it were, a contronym. It's that which holds the opposite. The ring is usually an object of value. It's precious, but it becomes my precious. It's my singular want, desire, value, which is not in the field of value. That's what the ring does is the ring undermines the field of value. Whoever is taken by the ring is taken in by a kind of radical, separate self-egoic narcissism, which drives them to the original murder, right? It's the Cain and Abel story recapitulated with Smeagol, who murders his friend, destroys value to get the ring, which is precious. Does that make sense? So there's this sense of, right? Now, how do you actually restore goodness, restore value? Through the fellowship of the ring, which is the fellowship of love, which is the fellowship of Eros, which is the fellowship of value and being together in the field of value. It's the opposite of the narcissism of Smeagol, who kills his friend. Actually, I've got to be willing to die for my friend, to live for my friend. I've got to be radically loyal to my friend. Sam is radically loyal to Mr. Frodo. And he says to, at a certain point in the journey, he says, Frodo, I know I can't carry the ring, but if I can't carry the ring, I'm going to carry you. Right? And there's this moment where an elf and a dwarf, right? The dwarf, one of the key figures, Gimli, right, says to Legolas, who's the elf, he says, they're in the last movie of The Return of the King, and it looks like they may be killed. He says, I can't believe I'm gonna die, right, fighting next to an elf. And Legolas responds, he says, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? But how great it would be to die fighting next to a friend, right? Fellowship of the Ring, it's the restoration of value. That's what it's all about. Now, how does Tolkien transmit that? How does Tolkien transmit it? Oops, sorry about that noise. How does Tolkien transmit that? Anybody? How does Tolkien transmit that? He transmits it, not in philosophy. He transmits it in a story. In other words, what Tolkien understands that it's not enough to write a philosophical treatise in Oxford, and he's sitting in the middle of Oxford where I wrote my doctorate, right? And he says, I'm not going to write another philosophical treatise. to actually take on the existential moment, right? That deconstructs value itself. No, I'm going to tell a story of value. And that's what Lord of the Rings is. It's a great story. It's an epic story. So value gets expressed through a story. And there's the Shire, where the hobbits live, and there's Gandalf the Grey, and there's, oh my God, right, the evil eye of Sauron. Then there's Saruman, right, the teacher of Gandalf, who gets seduced by Sauron. And there's, right, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, it's a story. So it's not value, right? It's a story of value. Does everyone get that? In order to respond to the meta crisis, we need not just to claim value, first principles and first values, number one. We need not just to re-enter the field of value, in which there can be diversity of values, but there's a field of value, and that field of value is supported by first principles and first values. Not enough. We need to realize, now stay close, friends, it's subtle and it's deep, but it's beautiful. We need to realize that first principles and first values are the plot lines of a story. That reality is value, that's true, reality is value. I'm sitting here in a Zen monastery. What do you do in Zen practice? You go into this very deep silence. You do it also in the practice and the original lineage in which I was trained, which is a Hebrew wisdom lineage. You go into, in Zen, you go into deep silence. And Hebrew wisdom lineage, you have silent practices and you have chant practices. But what are you doing both in chant and in silence? You're going deep inside. Where are you going deep inside? Into the field of value, in which everything obviously matters. The world is not made up of matter. Reductive material is simply wrong. The world is not made up of matter. The world is made up of what matters, right? The world's made up of what matters, that which matters. And I want you to catch it. It's so gorgeous. In English, the word matter, I mean, pure thingness, reductive, materialism. The word matter or material also in English means matter as in meaning. Does everyone catch that? So matter is just matter, right? The world of matter, even before the world of life. But it also means what matters, meaning matter, right? The ostensibly inanimate physical world is actually suffused with matter, meaning. And let me say it a different way. It's very subtle, it's beautiful, and it's clear though once you see it. You know, you all heard of the 10 Commandments. Who's heard of the 10 Commandments? Anyone heard of the 10 Commandments? Let's talk about the 10 Commandments for a second. Who's heard of the 10 Commandments? Anybody? 10 Commandments is a big movie in Hollywood. It also has a biblical correlate, as I know you all know. So actually, in the original Hebrew, there's no such thing as the 10 Commandments. It doesn't exist. The word is Aseret 10 Dibrot, the 10 words. It's the 10 words. And word is the very structure of reality itself. Now, the word, and my friend Terry Nelson and I texted yesterday about words, about the dharma of words. So the word in Hebrew is dibur, Aseret Dibrot, the 10 words. And the word, I'll spell it for you for a second, maybe we can put it in the chat box. The word is D-A-V-A-R. That's the word. D-A-V-I-R, D-A with an A. D-A-V-A-R, right? Davar, thank you. Davar. So davar means word, and davar means, ready? Thing. Means word and thing. So the word also means thing. So thing is an in-object, an inanimate object, like a rock. Okay, a rock is a thing. A davar is a thing. But a davar is also the word. So the 10 words of the divine are the 10 davars. Now you notice that the English and the Hebrew are doing the same thing. Who noticed that? Did anyone notice that? So in English, you've got matter, matter is a thing. Matter is a thing. And then you have matters also that which matters, meaning. Right? Does everyone see that? So davar in Hebrew, same move. Davar is a thing, but it's also dibur. And dibur is word, language. In other words, meaning. That is to say, reality is coded with meaning. Reality is not just made up of matter. It's made up of what matters. It's made up of meaning. But here's the next step. Ready for the next step? Who's ready? Do we get any yeses here? Anyone ready for the next step? Who's ready? Let's see if we can take the next step together. Are we in? We got a drum roll? We got a drum roll here. Are we awake? Are we alive? Good morning, Vietnam. Good morning, Vietnam. Who saw that movie? Robin Williams. Good morning, Vietnam. I love Robin Williams. I miss him. Who misses Robin Williams? I miss Robin Williams. Okay. So here we go. Good morning, Vietnam. Here's the next step. Okay. Here's the next step. Next step is amazing. It's stunningly beautiful and it's so elegant, which is, so matter and meaning, the thing and the word, which are value, right? Meaning matter is infused with meaning. Matter matters, meaning matters, meaning it has value, meaning all of reality is infused with value. Reality is valuable, right? The emergence of the manifest world is the discretion of infinity into manifest value, right? Value never exists independently of the context of story, right? Value is always a story of value. Okay, this is big. This is big. Okay, this is big. Value is always a story of value. In other words, and this is what we mean when we say reality is not merely a fact. Reality is not merely a value. Reality is not merely the fact of value or the value of fact. Reality is value embedded in a story. Does everyone get that? Isn't that gorgeous? I'm here with Christina. Christina, isn't that beautiful? Right? You got it? Oh my God. Yay. Oh my God. Right? Does everyone get it? Reality is value embedded in a story. It's stunning. That's literally what reality is. It's value embedded in a story. That's what we mean when we say reality is not a fact. Reality is a story, right? It's value embedded in a story. That's what reality is. So reality is a story of value. Okay. So let me say it even more clearly. Okay. So the source code of reality is story embedded in value, or you could say it the other way, value embedded in story, right? First principles and first values. 1, 2, the field of value itself, made up of these shared first principles and first values, which are a context for our diversity. So first principles and first values embedded in a field of value, embedded in a story. It never exists without story. Right? In other words, story is not, and here's what we're trying to say, and we're going to talk about this more in future weeks, but I want to get it here. Story is not made up. Story is not a fairy tale, in the sense that one would think that a fairy tale is made up. Story is the very structure of reality itself. Does everyone get that? Story is the ontology of reality. Right? Story is the ontology. Reality is made up of stories all the way up and all the way down the evolutionary chain. Okay? And we're going to talk about that more next week, but I want to just access it now. In other words, the reason Tolkien wants to respond to a culture that's deconstructing value, existentialism, pre-World War II, World War II. C.S. Lewis, his friend in Oxford, does it by reclaiming classical Christianity. Tolkien says no, Tolkien doesn't want to go that way. Tolkien says there's got to be a broader story of value. He says, let me make up a story. But that story that's made up, the details are made up, but the story is the archetypal human story. It's the story of friends coming together. It's the story of Eros. It's the story of the fellowship of the ring, where we come together and we honor each other and we love each other and we hold each other and we sacrifice for each other and we feel each other, right? And it's only the willingness to give up the ring, to throw the ring back into the fire from which it came, which is the only way to destroy it, that we reject the anti-eros, the anti-value of precious, my precious. Now that ring, that sense of anti-value is pseudo-erotic. It's eros. It's not the fellowship of the ring, a modern success story, but I called back in 2014 at an event that we had, we called it Success 2.0. It's the modern success story, right? The modern success story is rivalrous conflict. I've got a conflict. We're rivalrous with each other. We're competing against each other. And our competition is governed by win-lose metrics. You either win or you lose. And you got to be willing to commodify yourself, to self-commodify in accordance to certain rules of the marketplace, to essentially sell yourself, compete with other people to get ahead, often in dimensions of play that are not who you are and not your unique self and not rooted in goodness, truth, and beauty. And it's a very brutal competition. The nature of such is, for example, there's enough drinking water for everyone in the world, but there's 2 billion people today without drinking water. That's a problem. In other words, we have this less than 1% of the world that's monopolizing most of the wealth. We're about to develop a caste system like the Indian caste system, but far worse, in which that 1% can do augmentation. They can augment their bodies, called augmentation. They can enhance their cognitive capacities. They can buy into literally longevity, longer lives. Literally, the 1% can actually become substantively, right, fundamentally, right, more beautiful, smarter, longer lives, stronger, but that's win-lose metrics. And different versions of that win-lose metrics happens between all human beings all the time. That's the ring. We murder each other in so many small ways. There's 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 small murders we do of each other's unique self, of each other's eros. We've stepped out of the field of value because our story is not the story of the fellowship of the ring. Our story is the story of my precious, of the win-lose, great complicated systems. What do we need to do? We need to restore the field of value. To restore the field of value, we need to throw the ring into the fire, and we need to access, we need to tell a new story of value. See, it's not enough to do the important work that we're doing at the center, which is to actually reconstruct a field of first principles and first values, which we're working on very, very deeply, and we're about to publish. We finished writing it, the first book on this, right? The title of the book is First Principles and First Values Towards an Evolving Perennialism. The book's written, it's now, with the publisher, and just about to come out. It's exciting, but it's not enough. We have to also tell a new story, because Tolkien can't just teach you about value. He's got to tell a story. And that story's got to be an archetypal story in which we all locate ourselves. We're all Frodo and we're all Sam. And we're all Gandalf the Grey. And we're all those two brothers, Pippin and Merry. Right? It's all of us. That's who we are. So we have to tell a new story of value. And that new story of value is the Fellowship of the Ring. And the Fellowship of the Ring is the knowing, A, that value is real, and B, that it's a story of value, and C, that the greatest value in the world, the central value, is eros, intimacy, love. That is to say, the story is a love story. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yesterday was the coronation of Charles. And you remember the third movie in the Tolkien trilogy is the return of the king. And of course, there's many people who are correctly anti-monarchists, and they think that this king thing is ridiculous. And there's a lot of truth in that, right? The kings of England in many ways were devastating violations of the field of value and violations of the Fellowship of the Ring. That's absolutely true. Having said that, there's a reason why the world was fascinated in 1953 when Queen Elizabeth was coronated. And there's still fascination, but still fascination when Charles is coronated, because the king and the archetype means something, royalty means something, right? The scepter and the orb and, the sacred stone, right? And the crown, right? And the rod. These are all the objects that were involved in Charles's coronation. And the very notion of royalty itself means that the human being has value. Royalty means that the king participates in the divine God field. The king is a unique self, and the king, the very being and body of the king, has value. Now, we need to democratize royalty, right? We're fascinated because all of a sudden we have a story in which everything matters, right? The son of the king, Harry, writes a novel called Spare, and everyone reads it. And everyone's filled with the details of Meghan and Harry's life. Why? Because whether you like Meghan and Harry or not, blessings to them both, my dear friends Meghan and Harry, right? What Harry's trying almost desperately to say is, my life matters. And of course, not only Harry's life matters, my life matters, and your life matters. Not only Meghan's life matters, but Christina's life matters, and Shahad's life matters, and Krista's life matters. We're all royalty. But what royalty stands for, the reason we're allured to royalty, is because we are kings and queens. In the language of the lineage, we're b'nai melachim. We are the daughters and sons of the divine. We're all kings and queens. We're all royalty, and royalty means that we have intrinsic value, that to be a unique self is to be a unique expression of the field of value, and we're in devotion to each other's uniqueness. And that's what the Fellowship of the Ring means. It means I don't steal the ring for myself, which is the ego self, the separate self. We're actually all unique selves in Unique Self Symphony, and we're in devotion to each other, to each other's royalty. And each of us wears a crown, and each of us has a scepter, and each of us holds the orb and has the rod and wears, the robes and is surrounded by the horses and the bishops. You kind of wonder where England keeps those when there's not a coronation happening, don't you? But let's not talk about that now, right? So this is the day of your coronation. This is the day of my coronation. This is the day of our coronation. Kings and queens, royalty. And the reason that people reject the monarchy is for all the good reasons of all the brutality of the monarchy and the monarchy's hijacking of royalty to this little family. That's a legitimate rejection. But the more troubling rejection of royalty is that royalty doesn't exist. Royalty does exist. It's not that there's no royalty. It's that everyone's royal. You see? If there's no royalty, that's postmodernism, right? We're all just matter and nothing really matters. No, we're saying everyone's royal. It's all royalty, right? And we all matter. And we're all filled with intrinsic value, right? Which is filled with a unique proposition of meaning that no one in the world that ever was, is, or will be has. Okay, wow. Right? Can we feel that, my friends? Right? We're all royalty. We have to resurrect the Fellowship of the Ring and the story of value, which is the story of that fellowship. Because story, and this is what we're going to talk about next week. Now, I hope that we're going to be able to kind of show this next week in some depth and detail. But story is a structure of cosmos. Okay? That's what we want to talk about next week. That we actually want to show that story is not a made-up human idea, but that all of reality is not merely a fact, it's a story. And that story goes all the way down to the world of matter and all the way up. And that infinity and infinity are in the dance of a shared story of value. And that story of value is a love story. And that actually my love story, the love story of my life, is not dissociated, it's not alienated from the larger story. Rather, it is the most exciting chapter and verse in the larger story. Oh my God, royalty. It's such a crazy delight to be with you, kings and queens, royal ones. Fellowship of the Ring are we. Wow.